But our lead story tonight is the record inflation. It's the highest since 2014. So Priyanshi, this is perhaps what the RBI was expecting when they had that unexpected rate hike. So what's the news today?
That's right, Sonia. RBI had increased its interest rates in anticipation of a higher inflation. But the figures released today are really alarming. It's a 7.8% retail inflation, which is at a 8-year high. And in fact, if we look at the comparison from last year, it's almost double from what the inflation was in the month of April last year. And interestingly, the rural inflation this time is worse than urban inflation. Rural inflation is at 8.4%, which is more than urban inflation at 7.1%. So that is a big change, as a year ago, rural inflation was actually far lower than urban inflation. And maintaining focus on rural inflation, the pinch is even harder in our rural areas, and there's double-digit rural inflation in 4 states. And retail inflation has been above RBI's comfort limit for the 4th straight month. We know RBI has a threshold to keep inflation within 2 to 6% since 2016, but inflation has been above that target for the last 4 months starting January, as you can see in the graph on the screen. Now, what is driving this inflation? We know the obvious culprits are fuel and food, but it's not just roti, it's also kapda and makan that's going expensive. Clothing and footwear and fuel and light, in fact, drove inflation figures the most, and food inflation currently is at 8.4%, which is more than 7.7% in March. Now, a concern for the common man is that there's a higher inflation, but the bank rates have remained lower. So there are negative returns actually on your savings. Your money is actually losing value as it stays in the banks, as bank deposit rates are 5%, while inflation is at 7%. So really concerning figures there.
Right, and also, of course, Priyanshi, that along with that high inflation, we're seeing a market and rupee meltdown happening.
Right, there was a market meltdown today. The Nifty and Sensex, both indexes slid over 2%. It was the lowest closing for the market since March 2007. Sensex lost close to 1,100 points to end around 52,900 points, while Nifty lost 359 points to close at 15,808 points. And we can see how markets have in fact lost so much of their value in just the last 1 month. They were over 60,000 in April, and now they're trading around 52,000. So Sensex has lost close to 8,000 points in just a month. And it was, in fact, all down in the markets. Rupee also hit an all-time record low for the second time in just a week. Rupee hit 77.6 per dollar to end around 77.42 rupees per dollar. And this, as India is witnessing a record foreign fund pullout. Record $19 billion foreign funds were pulled out of Indian markets, and that's one of the reasons that's driving the rupee down.
Right, Priyanshi, thanks so much for that. So really, well, we've been analyzing all those numbers. How does it impact the Aam Aadmi's life? From ease of living, it's all about the cost of living. Now, our bureau's report from across India.
Living on the fringes of upmarket South Kolkata, 67-year-old Sudama Beta says working all waking hours is still not enough to meet even the basic needs of his family of 10. Inflation, he says, has become a life and death issue.
सरकार को सोचना चाहिए कि 5,000 कमा करके 10 परिवार को चलाने वाला आदमी कैसे चला सकता है। तब तो हम लोगों को लास्ट में मरना ही होगा, जीना नहीं।
Yellow taxi driver Mridul Nag says income has in fact dipped, but his costs have spiraled, both fuel and domestic expenses.
ये 7,000 रुपये में परिवार चल रहा था, नारी नहीं चल रहा। कैसे चला रहा था? वो ऐसे चला रहा, दाल भात खा के।
Tea vendor Gautam Das says mere survival has become a question mark given steep costs.
कैसे परिवार चलाएगा वही सोच रहा है।
तो आपका कमाई क्यों कम हुआ?
कमाई कम होगा, चीज का सामान बढ़ रहा है ना। सामान गैस का दाम बढ़ गया, चीनी का दाम बढ़ गया, भाड़ का दाम बढ़ गया, दूध का दाम बढ़ गया, पहले जितना दुख था अभी उतने उससे ज़्यादा दुख हो गया।
In Kerala's Thiruvananthapuram, 44-year-old Lajes Pereira points out that inflation this time has spared none. She is struggling to support aging and ailing parents on her father's monthly pension, pointing out that just for a domestic gas cylinder, she has to pay 1,050 rupees now.
Prices are just soaring high regarding any commodity. For example, for instance, if it is cooking oil, whether it's cooking oil or cooking gas.
In Guwahati, 40-year-old Rajshri says she had high hopes from the BJP government but is now disappointed as the price of all essential commodities has gone up but her husband's earnings have dipped. So running the household has become a challenge.
हम लोग कैसे चलेंगे? इनकम भी तो चाहिए ना, स्कूल का एडमिशन है, खाने का है, खाने को तो सब्जी वगैरह सबका दाम बढ़ा दिया है.
The prices are too hot to handle and across the country, inflation has spared no one. Mr. Prasad, who's been doing this business for the last 20 years, says even the COVID pandemic he was able to cope with. But the price rise has been too hot to handle and to survive. With inputs from Shankar in Kolkata, SP Babu in Thiruvananthapuram, Ratnadeep in Guwahati, in Hyderabad with camera person Nagraju, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.
Well, let's go across now to breaking news. I'm going to be joined right now by the ex-Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Namal Rajapaksa. He's the son of Mahinda Rajapaksa, the ex-Prime Minister. First, the latest developments we see there, Ranil Wickremesinghe. Now, he's a five-time Prime Minister of Sri Lanka from the UNP, an opposition party being sworn in as Prime Minister by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Now, President Rajapaksa, the brother of ex-Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, ex-Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa along with his family had to flee for shelter to a naval base. Joining me now is Namal Rajapaksa. Namal Rajapaksa, thank you very much for speaking to NDTV. You are speaking to me now from an undisclosed location. First, why did you and your family flee? We saw those pictures of you all leaving on a chopper. Why do you think it's reached a situation where you don't feel safe in your own country?
Well, first of all, I must say that we didn't flee the country or we didn't go out of the country, but just the security forces believe that in order to calm things down and also bring law and order, it's much more safer for my father, the former Prime Minister, to be in a safe location, and especially with the situation that we anyway had after visiting the present terrorism, which was a long-standing involved in Sri Lanka. And myself, I'm not in the same location, I'm in Colombia. And I'll be also involved in that and in the meetings that has been held. So it's nothing that we have been hiding from anything, but security comes first, especially for the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister. And we believe, these challenges we all face in the country we live in.
No, absolutely. Security comes first, and of course for your family members and people who are not in politics, and everybody actually, security does come first. But the point is, why do you think it came to this situation? Because the protests by people had been peaceful for the last 1 month, and now they're saying that it was actually pro-Rajapaksa supporters who came and violently beat up peaceful protesters, and that's why the situation escalated to where you and your father feel there is a threat to your lives.
Well, see, that's the wrong interpretation. If you look at how the entire protest started, was attacking President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's residence and being very violent and also destroying and burning, setting up fire for residences and also burning vehicles at President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's residence. And then it went up to extended to few other members and the ministers in the cabinet, including the former Petroleum Minister, Honorable Raman Lugge, Roshan Ranasinghe, Member of Parliament from Polonnaruwa, and many others. But yes, we do agree the peaceful protest is accepted, it has to be. But I think from all political parties, violence is not the solution. And see, if you look at what happened on the 9th, the provocation from both sides, but the provocation is not only from one side. So we have just law and order in the country, there's justice system in the country. So I think police have to bring justice and bring back normalcy, implement law and order, and use the court procedure. No one can take the law into their hand. what was in result? Many lives were killed. Member of Parliament was killed and then shot, and he was dragged on the floor. There was a video circulated, and buses were burned, vehicles were burned, houses were burned down, and also at the same time you see there were people who had no connection with politics at all, prominent businessmen. So their houses were burned down as well.
No, and
so
absolutely.
What happens when peaceful protests are being taken over by certain political interested groups, parties with political interest.
But in fact, I think that every political party has said that there must be an end to this violence. We're seeing visuals of those MPs' houses being burnt, and of course, the death of the killing of that MP as well, very tragic. But just to ask, Namal Rajapaksa, did you and your family miscalculate the anger that had come? Because even at the time when the elections happened, your father's prime minister, your uncle is a president, you were a minister, many other Rajapaksas were ministers in the cabinet. How could one family take over the democracy of Sri Lanka in a sense? Did you underestimate the public anger against this?
No, not at all, because we all believe in democratic process. I mean, see, our family has been in politics for the last 50 years, and my father's political career is 55 years. And we have lost elections, we have been at home, and we have won elections. But if you name anyone, other than the former finance minister, all of us came into parliament through people's vote. But at the same time, it was the opposition campaign that was targeting one family, rather than targeting the government. We see that happening in India, we see that happening in many other countries. So the government is not run by one family, and our SSPP, our political party, is not controlled by one individual or one family. The party is better, the party with a mechanism. But yes, I do agree the perception that has been created towards SSPP and our government is very different, especially by the opposition. That has been the slogan right throughout, not today. That has been the slogan ever since war was ended in 2009. And these entire allegations that were brought against us, whether it's about corruption, they investigated last in 2015, and still some of the cases are going on, and they investigated globally, whether we have accounts globally, but they came to the conclusion there is nothing like that. All those are false.
But Mr. Rajapaksa, but today as we speak, our correspondent in Sri Lanka tells us of how that there are people in Sri Lanka who can only have one meal a day. There's no cooking gas. There are lines for fuel. Do you accept responsibility? You say it's a democratic process, but do you, your father and your government accept responsibility for the absolutely terrible situation the people of Sri Lanka are in today?
See, the terrible situation, yes, we do agree there's a bad economic crisis going on in Sri Lanka, but this is not something happened overnight within last 6 months or 3 months, It was there for many years, especially with COVID-19 pandemic, as you know. Our economy was badly hit, and the President and the government had a clear vision in line with WHO and the rest of the world that the vaccination is the only way forward for us to reopen the country. And as a result, we are lost close to $5 billion in foreign reserves from tourism, and our exports have dropped because we had closed down factories for many months. So it came from there. And of course there was certain miscalculation when it comes to decision-making process. But because I personally believe all those decisions were taken with good intention, but unfortunately they were not being able to change with the new normal governing post-pandemic or after COVID-19.
In fact, one of these decisions, Mr. Rajapaksa, you said they were taken with the best intentions, but international observers have pointed to the fact that especially the reliance on China coming in, and your father, Mahinda Rajapaksa, was often seen as getting extremely close to China, and it was the whole Chinese investment model which has landed Sri Lanka where it is. In fact, when India has now come forward with much aid, do you regret what Sri Lanka's growing reliance on Chinese investment and loans had become?
No, I think Sri Lanka has to be non-aligned right throughout, and we shouldn't be a victim of geopolitics. We have to work with all the countries that are willing to help us, and especially, of course, China has been a great investor in Sri Lanka and has done a lot of projects. Same with India. India has been with us with Sri Lankans right throughout, especially during this pandemic time and post-pandemic. India was the first to send us vaccination, and then even now the credit line. So, Sri Lanka has to maintain an unaligned foreign policy and work towards the betterment of the Sri Lankans rather than getting in between the geopolitical struggle.
Mr. Rajapaksa, finally, as I said, you're speaking to me from an undisclosed location. Do you fear today for your safety, for your family's safety, your father's safety? A Sri Lanka court has today said that Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa and none of you can actually leave Sri Lanka. What would you say to the people of Sri Lanka who are watching? Are you fearful for your life?
So I think it's not only about my life. I think all Sri Lankans are fearing for their life at the moment because there is no law and order. You go into houses, you loot it, you steal stuff, you burn down houses for no reason. It's not only us. I mean, if you talk to most of the Sri Lankans, are feeling it. And on top of that, we are going through one of the worst economic crises in Sri Lankan history. Just imagine, you go through a worst economic crisis and your country is under a curfew and mobs are taking place with politically motivated organizations. And if you look at these mobs, I'm telling you with a lot of responsibility for my statement. There are a lot of political party representatives leading these mobs. We have pictures, there are CCTV footage, there are evidence that certain political party leaders are given leadership for these mob attacks. What is the end result for this? End result is destruction in Sri Lanka, which will drop tourist arrivals, which will cut down manufacturing in Sri Lanka and export. That will stop giving us or reduce giving us foreign revenue. So this fearing for life for one individual or a leadership is not the answer, it's not the question, it's about the entire country. So I believe this is the right time. The President has to take a decision. He has already appointed the Prime Minister, so now the new government has to go in. Sri Lanka has been going through for the last 48 hours without a government. You can't run a country with the worst crisis, economic crisis in the history without a government, right? So I think it's not about one individual or our family, our life. It's about entire Sri Lanka. We need to step up. We personally have
absolutely,
gone to LTT.
And at a time when
there is some reports, LTT terrorism, without even looking after, without even wondering twice about our security. But we are ready to face this. But as a country, we need to come up and move forward.
Mr. Rajapaksa, thank you very much for speaking to me and taking all questions. We see a new Prime Minister sworn in today. We hope that Sri Lanka will be able to come out of this crisis. Thank you very much. And moving from that big exclusive to, Akhilesh's insight on what's happening with the crucial June Rajya Sabha elections and why they're so important. So, Akhilesh, why exactly is the BJP tracking these numbers so carefully?
Well, because in July we will have presidential elections and the BJP of course will not be satisfied because it will still be short of majority in Rajya Sabha. The BJP and the NDA will not be able to get majority on its own in the upper house, and of course they will need support from either BJD or YSR Congress to get its nominee elected as the next president. And if we talk about the Congress party will also suffer minor losses in this round of Rajya Sabha elections, but Congress will be, satisfied in the sense that they will continue to maintain that LOP post with them, and they will be able to maintain this position by few numbers only. And on the other hand, the regional parties like the DMK and the YSR Congress, and also of course Aam Aadmi Party, they will be, for the first time in their history, will get largest number of Rajya Sabha seats. So these elections are quite crucial in that sense. And of course, three ministers, Nirmala Sitharaman, Piyush Goyal and Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, they will have to get re-elected. On the other hand, Congress stalwarts like P. Chidambaram, Kapil Sibal, Ambika Soni and Jairam Ramesh, they will also be looking for some safe seat from some state to come to the upper house.
Right. Thanks so much, Akhilesh, for those updates. Well, the Prime Minister spoke this evening at a global virtual summit on COVID on the invitation of President Biden. He called for major World Health Organization reforms.
In India, we adopted a people-centric strategy against the pandemic. We have made the highest ever allocation to our annual healthcare budget. WTO rules, particularly TRIPS, need to be more flexible. WHO must be reformed and strengthened to build a more resilient global health security architecture.
A quick look at other news. Well, 3 major cases on mosques, mandirs, masjid, mahals in courts today, all of them in UP courts. Why is there such a focus on this now? Well, just quick updates in the Gyanvapi mosque issue where women have asked for permission to pray at a shrine. A video survey has been allowed to look at whether there was any evidence of a Hindu shrine here. Regarding the Taj Mahal, now a petitioner wanted to open locked rooms here. The High Court summarily rejected it, saying that go and learn some history first. Next, you'll want to open judges' chambers. The Krishna Janambhoomi case in Mathura, the court has said take decision on all cases within 4 months. That's the update as of the moment. Well, let's just look at some other news now. So what exactly did the court say? The Allahabad High Court rejecting the petition to open the Taj doors of those locked rooms, saying there that go read your history, do a PhD first and then come back to court, and don't make a mockery of the PIL system with petitions like this. Well, on Karnataka, the cabinet has rushed through an anti-conversion law via an ordinance because they said they didn't want it to go through the assembly. It was likely to perhaps lose there or be a heated debate. This, of course, before crucial state elections next year and a cabinet expansion coming up soon. So the Bomai government pushing this through via an ordinance. There's been much opposition to this, with the Archbishop of Bengaluru saying he's written to the governor asking him not to sign this ordinance. In other news, the Congress is scheduled to begin its Chintan Shivir or introspection meeting in Udaipur. It will be for 3 days. The Congress's Rahul Gandhi taking a train to Udaipur. He'll meet with Congress workers on the way. So the Congress saying this is part of the new transformation starts from right here with Rahul Gandhi on a train to Udaipur. And a Kashmiri young man, a Pandit, has been shot dead by terrorists. Rahul Bhatt has been killed in a government office in Jammu. The police say that 2 terrorists barged into the government office and shot Rahul Bhatt in cold blood. He died later in hospital. It's the latest of a series of incidents targeting Kashmiri Hindus and those from outside Kashmir by terrorists. Well, just before we end, some better news coming on the heat from Bengaluru, where as a fallout apparently the cyclone, Bengaluru is lovely and cool. In fact, it's even cooler than Srinagar.
Bengaluru cooler than Srinagar. The maximum temperature in Bengaluru at 25.2 degrees Celsius is 8 degrees below the norm. Whereas in Srinagar, the temperature is above 30 degrees. That's 6 degrees more than it should be at this point in time.